Let's talk about Kathy Hochul. I know you follow New York State politics quite a bit. Man, she's like just keeps stepping on a rake, it seems to me. She loses this LaSalle fight in the Senate, in the New York State Senate.
Yeah.
She's now talking about suing the state Senate.
She has retained counsel to do that because essentially the Judiciary Committee voted down LaSalle 10-9. So now she's saying she's retained counsel. She's saying she's going to that they're only supposed to advise on an appointment like this. She's trying to do Cuomo glad-handing politics, but she has none of the political capital to do it. Is what it seems like.
Just a couple of things that she's done over the past couple of weeks. She screws up this LaSalle thing. He's horribly conservative. I want to talk about Hakeem Jeffries coming in too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
She also destroyed the right to repair bill. Apparently, we'll talk more about that more specifically down the road. She also raised the cap on pensions can hold more private equity hedge fund assets. Which is, and you combine this with the thing that she did with the Bills, with the stadium, was it that she did?
Right. It was a massive giveaway to keep the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo.
She's not very good at this.
Right.
And for a while, she, like in the wake of Cuomo, she was, seemingly at least capitulating to all the things you would want her to capitulate to, I guess. Yeah. And then, somehow she thought that she was doing something different. I
don't know. It's I think in the wake of Cuomo, we were happy to have someone normal, someone who just seemed normal, and she was at least saying the right things, right? But what's weird is that she's acting a little bit like she just came off of a really strong electoral win. Right?
She has a mandate, but she hurt Democrats down ballot because she was so poor.
Yeah. And so she kind of limped to election. And in an environment, too, where, you look at Democrats in other states where they had, these really unusually strong performances. And I don't mean, I mean in what we would call purple-ish states, there were
Pennsylvania, Wisconsin,
Michigan, and so in New York, and the Democrats did really, really poorly across the board. And Hochul limps to her first election and then comes out of it picking a fight with the state Senate that she came in not just I think it'd be one thing if she misread the room, thought there wouldn't be that much opposition, did the thing that New York governors have been doing for a generation, picked a conservative jurist to maintain this sort of conservative leaning majority on the state Supreme Court, and then expected that to sail through the Senate, and then and then was caught off guard by the pushback. But she's coming in guns blazing. I mean,
and it's just insane to pick this fight and have it go national, by the way, by bringing in Hakeem Jeffries, and his willingness to enter into this is very troubling and interesting to me as well. But in the middle of this push by the Biden administration to stack judges in positions of power, understanding that the right wing has had a leg up on this fight, appointing judges to these positions. Biden has been proactive about that and is breaking records with the speed of these appointments. To have Hochul in one of the biggest states in the country not really seem to understand or choosing to actively ignore the national narrative on Republicans being a threat to democracy and pushing a conservative nominee that would tilt the Court of Appeals in New York from a deadlock 3-3 to a 4-3 conservative majority, and then having the new leader of the Democrats join in on that fight. That's a massive disconnect between what the Biden administration is trying to say and emphasize the urgency of the judiciary.
And I think what it shows, and we definitely should talk more about how strange and troubling it is that Jeffries did that. But what it shows from Hochul is that she underestimated that judicial politics actually have salience among the most loyal Democratic voters now, in a way where I think, for a long time, it was essentially this idea that once you got the loyal Democrats to vote for you, you could sort of get away with anything once you were in office. And Cuomo operated under that impression for a very long time. And so maybe you just think she didn't realize people would both pay attention to a court fight and that they would have strong feelings about it. Which seems politically naive after years of New York politics being about figuring out how Albany works and going after the IDC and stuff like that. But again, it's crazy to want to take the fight so far that she would suffer a defeat in the Senate and then say she threatened at least to sue them over it instead of just taking the L, basically.
It raises a couple of questions. Like, first off, we should say the one, I think it's really good news in terms of like New York State politics sucks.
Yeah.
I mean, like in the Democratic Party apparatus in New York State, the machine, horrible. Right. I mean, you're talking about everyone from like Crowley to Hakeem Jeffries to Jacobs. I mean, it is in addition to probably being horribly corrupt, and it's just inept.
And they're inept too.
And they're inept as well. And again, this is sort of like the iron law of institutions. That's why Hakeem Jeffries is here with Hochul. Yep. He is not. This has nothing to do with anything other than maintaining a network and a power base within New York State. This is him just protecting his own seat and trying to get his own, people and patronage and whatnot.
Yeah.
Hochul won only by 5 points against Zeldin, which is far closer than it should have been. I think Schumer won by like 20 points.
Yeah.
In this state. But she called in a lot of reinforcements and a lot of money. And I think the idea was like, and this came up during when Zephyr Teachout and when Cynthia Nixon was challenging Cuomo. Cuomo needed to win big because he wanted to launch a national campaign. He wanted to be president. He wanted to be talked about presidentially, or maybe setting himself up for a VP if there was, maybe a woman who was the presidential candidate or something like that from a different part of the country. I mean, you just want to set him up to be a national figure. I'm not convinced that Hochul wasn't trying to do the same thing. Make it seem like there's like a real problem with Zeldin, get the money in, pad her win to the extent that she could. And it's almost as if she's following the plan that she had, even though she didn't get that padding. And when I see her suing, I think one of two things. She is not bright.
No.
Yeah.
Or she wants to be seen in opposition to because for whatever reason, she thinks this is 1993 too. And that's just not going to fly. It's just not going to fly. It's not going to help her at all. Like, she can't become Gretchen Whitmer by fighting the progressives in New York State. Like, Gretchen Whitmer is fighting in a state that's a purple state. She's in a blue state.
She's in a solid blue state. And her enemy, this is the crazy thing, is as much as anyone, including someone, as much as anyone would like to paint this as, the purity test left is the socialists and the DSA and the purity test left are sabotaging Hochul. It's women's groups and labor. And like, that's who you need. It's like,
who's mainstream Democratic Party if it's not women's groups and labor?
Right.
Who's more mainstream than that?
It's insane to pick this fight over someone whose radioactive issues are reproductive rights and labor. That's madness to pick the fight on those particular issues in this political environment.
Well, she made a miscalculation where she thought that by having, by selling the idea of appointing the first Latino in New York State government, essentially, where Latinos are completely underrepresented relative to like a population numbers. She thought that was going to carry the day, and people like Gustavo Rivera, all respect to that guy for basically coming out and both like having to protect a flank, but where he's like sort of saying to his community like, we need this representation, but this guy, he may be a Latino, but he is not representing you. He is not representing your interests, and that's that's not an easy thing to do. And I think Hochul underestimated Rivera's ability to do that, and others too. He's not the only one. And
what's crazy is I think there's going to be this. I think that inadvertently, the repercussions from this. I've seen the state senators, the Democratic state senators, now saying like, we're going to stop accepting judicial nominees who have run on the Conservative Party ticket, which sounds like a reasonable thing to do. In machine politics in New York City, that's everyone. That's like, that actually fundamentally could be a huge shift in how judicial politics work. If that becomes a new standard, they'll actually make people adhere to. So I think the backfire here could be way bigger than this one nomination even. And
also, I mean, I hope that it becomes empowering. Because I'll also say, like, you mentioned like that she underestimated, I should say.
George W. Bush over here.
Strategery. Poor strategery.
Hokey Hochul is what I call her.
You're going to give her a massage
Hoaxer.
from the back.
Hoaxer. You said that she underestimated the voters, but it really is the activists.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, this was, and I mean, it was voters in the sense that like, but it's the most active of voters.
Yeah.
Because, I know people who contacted their state senators who didn't even know the name of their state senators before they contacted them. Like the combination of losing the House, and I'm talking about Congress now, U.S. Federal House, losing the House, in part because of seats that were lost in this state, which were a direct result of having a conservative majority on the state Supreme Court, more or less the state Supreme Court. The close proximity of those two things happening when everybody was like, well, at least we're going to get the court back in 3 weeks or 4 weeks. And then she comes out with this. I mean, New York State Democrats, progressives, whatever you want to call it, need to get engaged, because we're watching like how California can lead the progressive agenda. I mean, whether you think that Newsom is full of it or not, there are things happening there that are good. Yeah. New York State needs to be doing that too. Mm-hmm. Yep. And
it's crazy. We've actually had these majorities for a while. Cuomo's been gone for a while, and it's still like pulling teeth to get these progressive priorities done in this state. Yep. It's absurd how many obstacles are put in the way of doing all sorts of stuff that should be low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, people got to get out of the city, move to Western New York, upstate New York. Let's do this, people.
We got to upzone Long Island too, like Nassau and Suffolk. If we can just dump millions more people into high rises surrounding all the LIRR trains, then we're gonna be in a new golden age.
Or we slice half of it off and give it to Rhode Island.
Yeah,
that's another option. Yeah, that actually works too. Rhode Island has a machine that actually like wins elections by like Soviet numbers, though.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you want to talk about the ineptitude of the New York's machine, like they lose elections.
It's crazy. It's crazy, and the way that they did those referendums a year and a half ago now was just a joke. Yeah. Was a joke. Yeah, and I mean, you can only imagine that they didn't want these reforms. It's the only way that you can really rationalize that.